Hey guys, glad for you guys to be here today. I'm Howard Lowe. I have David Koala and John O'Neill here with us, and both of us are a longtime Microsoft believer, and they've been using Microsoft technology for a long time. So today, I just want to talk about their experience in the journey that they've been going on the Microsoft hybrid cloud, going from the early stage of software-defined storage to today, where Data is deploying Azure Stack HCI. So to start off, maybe John, maybe you could introduce yourself really quick, and Dave, you could go next. Go ahead, John.
Thanks, Howard. It's a real pleasure to be here. I love getting together with you guys and chatting about all things technology, but particularly a lot of the Microsoft, as you said. I am a former 4-time MVP. I'm an RMVP these days, but my day job is as a CTO/CISO for a mid-size manufacturing firm headquartered in the US, but we have plants in 10 different states, and we have plants in Mexico. So we have a pretty broad base of installations, and we've been using the Microsoft platform for many years, going back to the early versions of Windows and NT and all those things. Thank God I'm still not supporting those. But one of the best things that happened to us as far as our current technology improvements and enhancements was meeting Dave and his team at TriCon and beginning to have discussions there, because we really learned about how to take advantage of, formerly storage spaces, but now, Azure Stack HCI and all those things, and a lot of the cloud technologies in Azure. So that's kind of a brief intro to me, and I'll toss it over to Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Hey, thanks, John and Howard. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone here today. So my backgrounds, I'm the founder and principal consultant at TriCon Elite Consulting. I'm an author, blogger, world speaker, and all-around good guy. You could probably see me speaking at some of the biggest conferences in the world, and actually coming up a little bit later on here in 2021, May actually of this year, I'll be speaking at Microsoft Build and the VMON conference, and actually they fall both in the same day, so that's pretty interesting. Recently been doing a lot of work protecting companies' Azure Stack HCI investments from ransomware attacks. So doing a lot of work with advanced persistent threat protection and making sure that companies can secure their kind of most precious assets that are out there. I'm a 9-time Microsoft MVP, 7-time Veeam Vanguard, their Veeam MVP program, and been around the community for a long time, written over 20 books. And so I've actually had the pleasure of authoring several books with John O'Neill Sr. here as well. So it's my pleasure to be chatting with you guys here today.
Hey guys, between both of you guys have so much experience, and it's been a pleasure working with you guys. I think today I want to just talk about your experience where our customer could really learn from you guys. I think I want to start off with it's really the journey that Microsoft's taking, because all of us are living this world of IT and technology constantly changes and advancements and threats. Dave, from your perspective, how far has Microsoft come with their technology building the infrastructure? Especially the topic today is really the technology that we are engaged with Microsoft is deploying on-premises hybrid cloud called Azure Stack HCI. How has this technology evolved from your point of view to really deliver a true solution for enterprise?
Well, I think that's a fantastic question, Howard, and that's one of the big ones that a lot of organizations are going to have is the integration with kind of their enterprise applications. And specifically, the journey started with Microsoft with the first version of storage spaces. This was kind of their first, what I would call, foray into the storage space, that part of the industry. And they had a pretty decent product inside of there, and Data built a business around that. And many customers that scale out file servers, and we've seen the technology kind of evolve. And one of the things that I like is that as a Hyper-V guy, as a Microsoft guy, the tools of the trade for us have always been two things: fundamentally two things: Hyper-V Manager and Failover Manager. And those are still at the root of what it is that we support when it comes to Azure Stack HCI and Storage Spaces Direct. And it makes it very easy for me to take individuals and organizations that have used this technology in the past and transition them over to what we'll call more modern infrastructure. Now, what are organizations looking for, moving forward? Well, it's beyond just speeds and feeds. The first step is you have to have a fast product, right? Everyone wants to have the Formula One car that can rip down the track as fast as possible. But you have to have safety measures in place as well. And I find that it's a balancing act of, the performance versus features and scalability and security. And at the very beginning, Microsoft had a very fast product. But now what they've been building and augmenting is the safety nets. They've been building and augmenting all of the integration points that we can have, seamlessly being able to move workloads between Azure and back, so from the public cloud back to on-prem. And so those are huge pieces for organizations, because one size doesn't fit all, one design doesn't fit all. You might be talking about a disjoint location out in some plant that doesn't have very good internet connectivity. Okay, well, we still need an on-prem solution for them. Are there certain workloads that we can run in a hybrid fashion? And so that integration piece of Azure Stack HCI, as it's evolved for Microsoft, that's what I've really seen. And Microsoft has really bought into this beyond just having another role or feature inside of their core operating system, Howard. They've actually built an entire product line around this now. They have a totally separate support team at Microsoft for their Azure Stack HCI lineup of products. They have a totally separate SKU, and they have a totally separate marketing team that surrounds that. And so that's pretty huge when you look at this from an investment from Microsoft. This isn't just something that they're looking at as a checkbox on some form that they have to fill out so they can get some kind of Gartner Magic Quadrant report. This is Microsoft going all in with this technology.
Yeah, I think that's important, and this goes back to John, right? John, clearly, you as a very senior executive decision maker, you have to see the evolution of technology, and you had to make a decision because you had to put this technology into your workload. How did you navigate that journey, and where are you at in that journey today?
Well, Howard, so you're absolutely right. And my role and in looking at what is best for the organization, I usually keep a three-tiered vision, if you want to look at it that way. And there's the immediate need, the things that we have to address today and tomorrow. There's the midterm, which is kind of, what we're going to see over the next 12 to 24 months. And then there's the long term, right, which is the next 5 to 10 years even, which is, very hard to nail details that far out, but you should be able to see some of the ship in the cloud kind of thing, or and through the fog is what I meant to say, because that long-term vision is hopefully aligning and steering with the other two parts, right, that are very precise and planned. And our journey with Azure Stack HCI began with Dave and I, talking and working together as MVPs. That's how we met. And we began looking at addressing things that really every organization deals with, but particularly for-profit companies, of course. And that was in enhancing efficiency, right? A lot of people say productivity, but really it's possible to be very active and even productive, but not necessarily efficient, right? If you can make 100 resources or 100 widgets with one set of resources, and you want 200 widgets, and your solution is to double the resources, that's going to cost you twice as much money, right? Well, with Azure Stack HCI, Dave and I collaborated and envisioned a solution where we could build 200 widgets with minimal investment over that original 100 widgets worth of investment, if that makes sense. And so that's kind of where we started, and we improved things like IOPS and network bandwidth, right? We eliminated bottlenecks that we had in our old SAN type architectures and NAS systems out there. And we pushed through that and saw a big increase. But, you know, as with all other things in IT, the security demands are, you know, 1,000 times what they were when we began this journey, you know, 5 years ago or whatever. And so, you know, we had to align with that. And the beauty is that the foundations of Azure Stack HCI really lend themselves to creating a very secure infrastructure. For instance, one of the things that Dave and I have written about and together that we've worked a long time on together is what we call our secure fabric design. And that provides a layer of identity that is very restricted underneath the production domain and allows us, in the event of a ransomware attack or some other type of emergency, to recover those systems and get our teammates, our employees, back up and running in very short order, right? We don't have to pay ransoms and we don't have to wait weeks while we try and rebuild things. So that journey for us was very important. And, you know, I will speak quickly about one thing Dave mentioned that was very important to us, and that is the ability to migrate workloads efficiently between our private cloud on-prem and our public cloud, you know, up in Azure and that kind of space. Because as a manufacturer, the way our company's founder once said it is, if the presses aren't going up and down, we're not making money and our customers aren't happy, right? So yes, we need all the other things that every organization needs, and finance software and HR software and customer relationship management software and all those things. But at the end of the day, we can take an outage in those things, but we can't take an outage on the production floor, right? Customers aren't getting parts made. We're not delivering on our promise to them, that sort of thing. So using the Azure Stack HCI foundation, we created a very robust solution that isolates that layer to kind of protect itself and even in some ways self-heal when an event occurs.
I love the fact that you compare speeds and fees to ROI, to efficiency for production, because many of the customers that we engage on a daily basis, you know, they have multiple challenges, and a challenge could be the system's not reacting fast enough. We need more capacity, but ultimately, at the end of the day, and I've been through this many times, is that 1 a.m. call that the cluster is down. Right, that's the call that we all get, right? And I tell the customer, at the end of the day, you need to find a technology or foundation that is stable, that you could trust. And I think that's one of the areas, and I want to kind of drill down a little bit, because I know both of you knows Azure Stack HCI very well, and our audience will know there's so much documentation on it. And we all believe that Microsoft, in the journey of 10 years, developing this foundational technology called Azure Stack HCI, they have done a pretty good job to continue to innovate and make it secure. But I guess the question I have is, you know, in the marketplace today, and both to Dave and John, there are many choices. There are choices out there. There are choices of other HCI vendors. There's choices of other virtualization vendors. Can you guys elaborate on a couple points why you believe Microsoft Azure Stack HCI has its advantages, so our audience understand how to look for it? Maybe we'll start with Dave real quick.
So I'll give you one right off the bat. Billions of dollars of research and development that Microsoft has put into Microsoft's Azure public-facing cloud. Microsoft backports that technology into what we see as on-prem solutions. And that innovation alone drives so many cool features that we can use and we can leverage. And so although we don't get all of the same features as what are available inside of the commercial public cloud that Microsoft has on the back end, the most important ones get backported that we can use inside of this platform. I would challenge any other vendor that's out there to show us what type of research and development is put forth because Microsoft's budget that they have for R&D moving forward, looking at that 5-10 year journey, is second to none in industry, in my personal opinion.
How about you, John? That's a really good point. How about you, John?
Well, I'm gonna start out with my CISO hat on and talk about security, because that's a big one, right? And one of the conversations I get into a lot with discussions over competing technologies and things involve open source solutions and all that, right? Because at the low level, what they see is, hey, it's cheap, it's free, right? It's free. And what I tell them is it may be free, but the ransomware attack, the malware infestation, those things aren't free. And none of those products have even remotely as much investment in securing them and adapting to attacks as they evolve and that kind of thing. I mean, Microsoft puts billions of dollars into security research, right, and their platforms. As Dave said, they build this stuff out on the public cloud, like you have Defender for Office 365 and Azure ATP and privileged identity management and all these kind of things. And they will backport some of that into the on-prem products. But, the thing is looking at all the solutions and all the opportunities, I just believe that their investment, not just commitment, but their investment in the security is second to none. And I will mention that somebody always says, yeah, but they're targeted more than anybody else. And I said, yeah, and that's why they are so well defended, right? The Army that has done nothing but practice, when they face their first, combat adventure, it tends to not go as well as that seasoned Army that's been unfortunately fighting battle after battle for the last, 10 years or 15 years. They know how to fight. They know their enemy. They know all these kind of things. And that's really how I look at the cybersecurity end of it, with a lot of the security integrations that are in Azure Stack HCI is, they're light years ahead of where others hope to be.
Awesome. I'm gonna drill down one level down. Then we won't go any more down. Is the application of this Azure Stack HCI hybrid cloud platform that Microsoft now introduced? Like you said earlier, alluded earlier, Dave, that Microsoft introduced Azure Stack HCI OS as a standalone product last year in December, and they will continue to innovate that solution across with a rapid pace, because they want to continue to add value, hybrid services, cloud services, to allow you to take advantage not only the benefit having your workload on premises, but still have the hybrid services allowed. Drilling down on the specific usage model application, I know that in our world, we have deployed with our customer Azure Stack into production data center that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 nodes. We also have done it where we will run specific SQL workloads focused on Azure Stack HCI. Also, we have done it where a lot of offices, remote branch offices, doesn't need all this big solution, but they have a 2-node, what we call edge remote office solution. In that context, I'd like to get a feel from you, John. How are you leveraging these different options that this platform gives you, and how are you taking advantage of it?
So thanks for throwing it over to me, because as you're talking, all these things are lighting up in my want to talk about. And one thing, it's funny, I just had this conversation earlier this week with somebody saying, oh, well, so is the Azure Stack HCI OS, is that, did they build that on the old storage server OS? And I said, no, it's a bit of a different, right? Remember that platform that was there for NAS devices a bit in the 90s and I guess the 2000s, but Azure Stack HCI is a much more robust, much more awesome product. And the way that we deploy it in a manufacturing scenario is to address things like I was talking about earlier, where I really have to protect that production plant floor. So what we can do is we can deploy, larger deployments, 4-node, that kind of thing, up for the front office where most items reside. Even, the main ERP application, enterprise resource planning application, that sort of thing. But then we can put a 2-node out on the plant floor in a secure location, And the way that we devise that is it is firewall completely separate. It has its own secure connection up into the public cloud and everything else. And we replicate some of the data from the ERP, the data that's needed for production, right, to make the parts. And so here's what happens is, say that we have an office malware infection, because I got to tell everybody that's usually where it happens, right? Somebody clicked an email, somebody had time on their hands to browse the web, that kind of thing. The people that are on a manufacturing floor running a piece of machinery or driving a forklift, yeah, they're not browsing the internet and you know, worrying about email too much. So it happens in the front office. And what we do, or what our network is designed to do, is basically isolate that traffic from the plant floor. It separates the two networks. So the front office will shut down. I mean, needs to, but the production floor, using the replicated data from the ERP and the independent firewall and secure connections, can continue to run, can continue to transmit EDI to partners and all those kind of things, right? And then when we clean and recover the front office, they basically reattach and away you go. And the same kind of scenario exists across our WAN, you know? So we want our teammates to be able to work collaboratively, to be able to communicate at all times as if they're just sitting in chairs next to each other in the office, right? Kind of like we're doing right now, doing it over the public internet and that kind of thing. In the nature of day-to-day business, they need to do things that are secure, right, across those point-to-point links or MPLS circuits or VPNs, whatever. Well, we have different size clusters at different locations depending on their demands, depending on their needs, right? If they have a huge amount of engineering data, because we have an engineering and design center, right? They may need more storage for that area than an entity that is just doing a small amount of repairs and that kind of thing. That entity, you know, uses the ERP out of the main data center and stores very little local data, so they don't need a big robust solution. But we still use Azure Stack because it provides so much high availability over just using a, you know, standalone system that it's a no-brainer for us, the investment.
That's great. So very good perspective how you're applying the technology infrastructure to various aspects of your business, physically and application wise, because this product is scalable from 2 to 3 to 4 and run across different applications. I think that's the value of this technology that's scalable. Dave, one of the biggest challenge I have convincing customer today is once they're sold on the fact that this technology and platform architecture is scalable, is it easy to manage? You spend so much time troubleshooting, design. Is it easy to manage? Do you have to be a rocket scientist to manage an Azure Stack HCI and make it work?
So I think the one question that I always answer when talking to customers, and anybody that's been around operations for a significant amount of time, is there certain technologies that are put into organizations that we lose sleep over? And so the one question you have to ask yourself is this technology that you're going to put in going to be something that you're going to lose sleep over? If it goes bump in the night on the weekend at 1 a.m., is everything going to come down, and is my phone going to absolutely light up with calls and emergencies and panic and all of the other things that go along with it, being an on-call resource? And honestly, Howard, of the hundreds and hundreds of these clusters that I've deployed over the last 2 to 3 years, I don't get those emergency panic phone calls. The emergency panic phone calls come from something else. For example, I can't connect into my Azure Stack HCI because maybe the power supply or the PDU for the core switch is down and I don't have a path to it. But ironically enough, on these edge devices that are direct connect in a 2 or 3 node configuration, they can actually stay operational. So once we restore power to that core switch or we fix that networking issue, ironically, nothing went bump in the night in one of our clusters. No, and I have unfortunately been on the other side of that where the cluster did go bump in the night. But where did it go bump in the night? It was an admin level ransomware attack where we didn't have the secured fabric design, where we didn't have a zero trust model when we had to come in and help that customer. It's a very tough situation to tell them that, you know what, you might be in a situation here where the bad guys got all your backup data. They got all of your production servers. You might have to pay. Well, that's not really a fault of Azure Stack HCI. That's a design problem, right? The customers that have moved out into the secured fabric that have a kind of a disaggregated administrative structure, they follow the principles of zero trust. They have advanced persistent threat protection. I've seen very, very few that have had that particular scenario. Out of all of the crashed Azure Stack HCI clusters, that's probably one of the most common scenarios. And other than that, the only other scenario that I see where customers are kind of shooting themselves in the foot is they don't look at the scalability of what it is that they've actually put in place. For example, what you installed 2 years ago is not necessarily going to be able to handle double the workloads now, 24 months later. Maybe you need to add more RAM. Maybe you need to increase the back-end network. CPUs might be fine, but maybe a small upgrade would be enough. But you can't just keep loading and loading and loading and loading thinking that it is the public cloud, because when we think in public cloud perspective, nobody ever thinks about capacity. What is the maximum capacity that we're going to take and that we're going to hit wherever it is that we're storing these virtual machines and these workloads? But we do need to still pay attention to that on-prem, and on-prem is the world that I live in. So for example, your cluster that had 256 gigs of RAM per node, maybe you need to do an upgrade to 512. And the good news is we still had enough room that we could actually make that a hot upgrade. We can live migrate all of the workloads off to the remaining nodes. We can go through a node by node upgrade, and we can actually do a lot of those things without even incurring downtime. So from a resiliency and robustness, especially as Microsoft moved into Gen 2, which was Server 2019's version of Storage Spaces Direct, and since the Azure Stack HCI SKUs, very, very robust platform.
So,
is that true, John?
I was just going to say, please let me throw in here, because that is absolutely true. Both things that Dave was talking about. First and foremost, 5 years ago even, but anytime past that, we used to think of two types of things in our infrastructure, right? Oh, our switches, our routers, those kind of things stay up for years at a time, okay? And when they fail hard, but it just doesn't happen. I mean, I did a lot of time in network engineering, and it was not uncommon to get into a customer's switch or router and see it has, 73 weeks of uptime or something like that, okay? And you just didn't imagine that happening on your servers, on your OS level stuff, right? It was all like, wow. I mean, I remember, in certain versions of Windows where you just needed to schedule a reboot every week just to kind of keep it clean and performing. You guys remember those days. And now with Azure Stack HCI, this is the first real platform that in my time I've really seen from Microsoft or anyone where I can say it doesn't incur those things. Like Dave mentioned, it now has the same level of resiliency as that stuff we used to look at it being totally different, the routers, the switches, and those kind of things. I mean, now the infrequent issue of, a router going down or something like that, that infrequency is no more, no less than what I deal with the Azure Stack. And that's a nice problem to have. Now, of course, because of security concerns, we shouldn't have servers that are, have a 1 year uptime, because you better be patching them and updating them and rebooting them when required. But if you were, say you were in a totally air gap situation where that Azure Stack, it would not surprise me at all for someone to come and say, yeah, that thing's been running for 1.5 years and we haven't rebooted it. We haven't done anything. The other is the capacity planning, the expandability that Dave was mentioning. It's so great, and particularly with our data on rigs that we use, as he mentioned, we can do things like upgrade RAM and that kind of thing hot, but we also developed a solution where, say, we had a 2-node unit in place and we have a great problem, right? Where things have increased such where it no longer fits us. Well, what we do is we build a new 4-node cluster, we migrate everything over to it, and then we reset the other one and deploy it to another area, like one of those other scenarios where I told you that could benefit from a 2-node cluster. So it isn't like before where it's a rip and replace. This is more a lift and shift type scenario, right? We're just going to lift it off the 2-node and put it on the 4-node and then shift the 2-node over to another role.
I love the experience. We could talk for hours. I want to have one last topic to talk about. Again, I'm looking at a little bit bigger picture of Microsoft, looking out in the world of other people offering solution. I want to look at from cloud down a little bit, meaning that the Azure Stack HCI solution is positioned and designed to be a hybrid cloud infrastructure that you can run on premises. Do you believe having that capability compared to the world that having to take the ability to take advantage of all the hybrid services in Azure, it is something that enterprise will benefit from? I'll start with you, John, and we'll pass it to Dave.
Absolutely. And one of the big reasons why is something you talked about earlier, and that's management, right? Being built on those same technologies, those same premises, those same design criterias, the solutions in Azure Stack HCI allow technicians, allow IT pros to learn a set of tools, a set of responsibilities and that kind of thing that they can reuse in their public cloud as well as in their on-prem, right? Now, obviously that would require their public cloud be Azure because, you know, if it's something else, it's totally different. But for us, because we do live in a hybrid scenario, that is really helped the efficiency of the IT team, because now instead of having to dedicate somebody to learning how to use the cloud and somebody to managing your internal architecture, which is how we started with the cloud, you know, just a few years ago. Now we have somebody that knows how to do certain things within, say, Hyper-V Manager and that sort of thing, and they're doing the same kind of things up with WVD and that area. So it means a lot when it comes to that.
How about you, Dave? You think this direction that we're getting into is the right thing for enterprise customer having this hybrid services?
I think it has to be a balance, Howard. I think it's not a one size fits all. I think there's certain cases where having a dedicated, non-connected fabric design still makes sense. I still think that that is a very valid design, but I also think that having the ability to take and have template VMs and things like that we can push down that are the same ones that we're deploying in our Azure cloud that we can now deploy on-prem and have that same unified UI experience is also very important. And I think it's very important because the robustness of the public cloud's role-based architecture, where we can, what I call micro-segment tasks down to individuals, and where I can activate privileges on demand with things like Azure PIM, Privilege Identity Management, and I can have those credentials only last for a certain period of time, greatly reduces the attack surface that we have out there. So I think it is a balancing act. I think definitely it's a good fit for some organizations with full-on Azure Stack HCI fully integrated with Azure Cloud, but I still think that the Server 2019 version and the coming Server 2022 version of Storage Spaces Direct is also still going to be very, very popular. Got
it. As a wrap, I think we've been chatting a lot, and I think it's incredible stuff. We could talk forever. As a conclusion, I'll give you both a couple of minutes to talk to kind of conclude your thinking. If you had to share your thought with all the enterprise customers, your peers, our customer in the marketplace about your experience, what would be one or two rule of thumbs, or what would you recommend to them to think about as they want to come on this journey that we've been on for the last 10 years? John?
I'll tell you, it's what I call the double S, or the S squared if you want, and that's scalability and security. Okay, Azure Stack HCI adds the ability for scalability. Well, that sounded horrible, but it adds the things necessary, the components necessary for you to truly scale easier than you've ever done before. And you need to incorporate that in your plan. Remember, I talked about that 3-level vision. Yep. You should have that in that vision. And then on the security aspect of it, as Dave and I have both talked about today, you know, when you build out your on-prem infrastructure, do it with, you know, identity management at its core, and having a secure fabric type design and a zero trust model and all that, because if identity is compromised, everything else is right behind it, right? It's like once the rabbit's in the house, you know, catching it is a different story. So with that, I'll flip it over to Dave.
I love the 2 S's: security, scalability. I'll remember that and talk to my customer. Dave, your last word of advice for all your peers out there and potential customers.
Well, I think choice is the big one. Like especially when it comes to Azure Stack HCI, it's built on an independent unified hardware platform. So it doesn't matter if you're a Dell shop, an HP shop, a Lenovo shop, a Data On shop, it doesn't matter. All of those vendors are going to have solutions for you. But there is a difference between the vendors building a solution and fully supporting that solution 100%. So this isn't just a shameless plug for, you know, all of my friends that work over at Data On, and Howard and yourself. I told you very early on when we started to evaluate the Data On platform, there was one thing that really stuck out to me, was the fact that the maintenance and support that's provided by the hardware partner, if they support the software stack on top of that, that's huge for me. Because I can go buy hardware from anyone. Hardware's not hard for me to acquire. Finding a partner that will support the entire stack up and down is huge for me. Because at the end of the day, if John has to take and pick up the phone and phone support, he's going to be able to get the same level of support that he gets from myself and my organization through the hardware partner, being you guys at Data On. And that's absolutely paramount in my decision, because the thing is that I'm not always going to be 100% available, and there's a 24-hour support line with Data On, and that's so paramount to the decision of, you know, choosing your hardware vendor. That makes the difference of what platform it is that I'm going to choose. That, and I also look at the track record of success with the deployment. I want to talk to previous customers that have used the technology before. When we talk to Data On, they're like, okay, here's the list. How many you want? You want 100? Here's 100 people. Talk to them. You know, that's really big when it comes to deploying this, and that's what helps me sleep at night.
Thank you, guys. It's been actually a pretty incredible conversation. A conversation that is very genuine, a conversation that's very real, because both of you live and breathe this technology for a long, long time, and you, John, actually have to live in it every day along with Dave. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate you sharing your insights, and I think what we have done today will be helpful for many customers that's looking on this hybrid cloud journey and looking at Azure Stack HCI as a solution stack for them to run in their application data center workload. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Howard. It's been a blast.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, John.
Talk to you soon. Stay safe.